All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Capital Pulse. My name's Jeff Hogan, and we're going to be offering up insights and ideas to be able to grow your business and finance it and help put together some action plans on your business. All right. So, anyways, if you've been watching the recent news on it, you've probably heard something about an inverted yield curve. Well, that's not something that happens with a chiropractor, and it's certainly not something that a pose that you do in yoga. It's really something that's used in the finance world. Really, what happens? I'm going to put that down a little bit. There it goes. It's the closest thing we have really to a crystal ball. Usually, when the curve flips an inversion, basically it means that long-term rates are actually cheaper to borrow against than short-term rates. But usually what happens when that happens is the doom and gloomers come out and they basically start screaming and gnashing their teeth about a recession is right around the corner. We're all going to die. Okay, Chicken Little, but that's not what's going to be happening. So, how can you use this as a business owner? And you don't need to panic. What you need is a plan of attack and how to be able to utilize this against for the benefit of your business. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the bond market, which is the yield curves, and how it's currently acting basically like a petulant teenager who won't listen to anything you said and doesn't want to do anything and is just looking to borrow the keys to the car to go out and hang out with their friends. And how you can use that to lock in a massive win for your business. All right. So, what is the yield curve? All right. Normally, it's very simple. It's basically if you borrowed my lawnmower, you'd have to pay me basically $5 for that. But if you wanted to borrow it for, just an afternoon, it's cheaper. If you wanted to borrow it longer, you need to pay me higher amounts to borrow it because of the fact that you're keeping it longer. And there's a lot more risk involved. Maybe the thing breaks, maybe I move away, maybe a lot of things that happen along those ways. That's a normal yield curve. Basically, long term debt costs more than short term debt, right? The longer you borrow money, the more it should cost. But right now, short term rates are cheaper, are actually higher expenses than the long term debt. So that's how the curve gets inverted. Basically, the 2 year rate is much higher than the 10-year rate. That market is basically saying, oh my gosh, I'm terrified what's going to happen next week. But I'm not terrified in the year 2034 because of the fact that I think everything's going to be fine. So they're basically betting long term on the market. It's a glitch in the matrix. And while your talking heads on the TV are basically screaming about what it's going to do on the S&P, smart business owners right now are really looking to see what they can do and basically get a sale on long-term capital. That's where the magic comes in. Because remember, your CPA is really trying to make you look like a pauper when you have to file taxes. You don't have any money, you're not making any money. But the yield curve is basically going to give you the opportunity to look like a king for the next 20 years. Because what is the plan? It's basically to refinance your short term debt into long term financing because the 10-year is lower. That makes the rates much cheaper and your cost of capital. So you can look at the SBA 504 program, which is tied to the long term data and is also out for right now at a discount. So if you're sitting on a variable rate line of credit, any kind of short term financing loans, capital equipment loans, or any type of short term financing or bridge financing, you're being punished for being short term. What you want to do is you want to convert that into long term debt. You're paying for emergency prices with everyday money, right? So that's the move. Refinance that expensive short term pauper debt into a 20 or 25-year SBA loan. You're essentially shorting the recession. You're locking in a rate based on the market long term optimism while everybody else is sweating out the short term consequences. So the yield curve isn't a warning sign, it's a value add menu to the fixed rate cost of capital, right? So you're moving something on your balance sheet from short term to long term. And don't let the headline scare you into staying small. That's what the big players do a lot of the time. They take these inversions and they restructure their debt and then they use that money to scale their business and grow it. There's no reason as a small business owner you shouldn't be able to do it too. So if your currently loan rates has a rate that's, changes every time the Fed hiccups or burps or even opens their mouth, you're on the wrong side of the curve. Reach out, give me a call, and we can talk about how we can convert your short-term stress into a long-term legend play and build your business. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jeff Hogan. Keep your fingers on the capital pulse, and I'll see you tomorrow. Reach out if you have questions.